No human has ever witnessed this sight in person. The lunar sunset and the unbelievable drop in temperature that follows the disappearance of the sun from the lunar sky. This is something that the Firefly Blue Ghost mission managed to capture a mere 5 hours before the darkness of space and temperatures approaching the coldest temperature in the universe silenced the probe forever. But Firefly Blue Ghost discovered a whole lot of other things besides fantastic sights like this. In addition, Blue Ghost uncovered quite a number of scientific facts about the moon that nobody believed was true, including a very interesting discovery just beneath the lunar surface that completely confounded all of the experts. A discovery that suggests that the moon may be a hollow object after all. All of this and more coming at you on The Angry Astronaut right now. Good afternoon, space enthusiasts, and welcome to another Angry Bulletin. I'm not calling this an Angry Alien Bulletin because, in my opinion, all this is a scientific fact without a direct connection, at least not in my opinion yet, that there's anything artificial about the moon or any sort of artificial or extraterrestrial origin about the moon, at least nothing that can't be explained with something natural. That being the case, however, discoveries that have been made recently on the moon by the Firefly Blue Ghost lander have been nothing short of astonishing. And we run into these sorts of things all the time with these new missions. For example, the Chandrayaan-3 lander from India, that particular lander discovered some very amazing things, including the fact that just beneath the surface, just about a meter or perhaps even less than that, beneath the lunar surface, the temperatures even out. They become far more moderate than they are on the surface. Again, does that suggest that there's some sort of artificial environment inside the moon designed to support life of some kind? Well, no, I don't think that there's enough evidence to suggest that just yet, but at the same time, it makes the idea of establishing a subsurface colony on the moon a lot more doable. It's going to require a lot less energy to heat and cool a facility like this if it's just a short distance beneath the lunar regolith. And speaking of short distances beneath the lunar regolith, well, Blue Ghost discovered something as it was drilling into the moon that was very much unexpected, together with many other scientific revelations that continue to prove that we were wrong about the moon. So wrong. Now, first of all, I'd like to thank the following incredible folks who have decided to support me on Patreon this month. Guys, G-Y-S, all in block caps. In addition to that, there's also Klaus Kingsdorf, and also If I Was the Devil, and then Andrew Gaudet, and then MEB or Meb, followed by Brad Hove and Brian Henry. Also, Barbara Warren have supported me on Patreon, and Simon Saunders. And finally, Gifley Carlson. Thank you so much for your support, and keep in mind that I'm giving away another free t-shirt to a random Patreon supporter by the end of this month. So a few more days. If you'd like to join these folks, all the details are in the description. Okay, let's go ahead and move on to these discoveries from the Blue Ghost lander. Now, first of all, do you want to see something incredible? This is an eclipse, a solar eclipse as witnessed on the moon when the Earth moves between the sun and the moon, of course. And that is quite a totality. It completely devours the sun, and of course the reason for that is the Earth is substantially larger than the moon, so eclipses are far more total, far darker. And by the way, the temperature on the moon drops from 150 to 250 degrees Celsius within a few minutes during a solar eclipse. And of course, this is because of the lack of an atmosphere on the moon. The temperature immediately immediately drops. There's nothing to hold in the heat, but quite an astonishing sight, to say the least. And you still have this ring effect, this little glowing gem at the edge of Earth's shadow as the sun slowly comes back into view. But let's go ahead and learn a bit more about the unexpected discoveries. I'm quoting from a space.com article. And incidentally, once again, the media isn't covering these discoveries with any sort of thoroughness, so I leave that up to you as to why that's happening. But let's go ahead and get going. Quote, lessons learned and on-the-spot surprises from the first fully successful commercial lunar lander mission bolsters the chances of long-term robotic and human operations on the moon. The Firefly Aerospace Blue Ghost Mission 1 safely touched down on March 2nd within the targeted Mare Crisium landing zone. Plopping down on its 4 landing legs, the spacecraft delivered 10 science instruments and technology demonstration gear through the Commercial Lunar Payload Services, or CLPS, initiative. Blue Ghost completed more than 14 days of surface operations during 346 hours of daylight, stretching its lifetime for a little over 5 hours into the super chilly lunar night. I should have had a heart monitor. My heart was racing, but I had full confidence in the team, recalled Jason Kim during the 40th Space Symposium in Colorado Springs. The trek to the moon involves 7 major engine burns, doing so with the company's in-house engine technology that performed with precision, according to Kim. Quote, so we're going to use that engine over and over in future missions. The key to Blue Ghost's spot-on landing was plotting out the spacecraft's changing mass properties to ascertain the craft's constantly changing center of gravity. The team was smart enough to design the vehicle with 4 propellant tanks side by side. Quote, so having that balanced design really helped land on the moon and stick that landing, Kim told the audience. It's just what commercial companies do. They come up with creative solutions and innovation to attack the problem. And by the way, this is an example that everybody else needs to follow, because thus far, too many other companies are using these tall, top-heavy solutions to try to land on the moon, whereas Blue Ghost is squat and balanced and has a lot of mass towards the bottom of the craft, meaning that it's going to land successfully. Firefly also conducted robust testing that included 500 hours of rehearsals using multiple simulations to design the system. Another checklist success was Blue Ghost's autonomous landing. Quote, there were no communication outages that we had to worry about, no latencies that we had to worry about, or false alarms for human error. It was just doing everything autonomously in the last hour, and that's what made it successful, but also that's why it was so challenging, according to Kim. As a big believer in autonomy, Kim said that the company is doubling down on that capability. Quote, all of our spacecraft going forward are going to have some level of autonomy. That's where the future is going. And after landing, Blue Ghost immediately got to work. Kim spotlighted 2 payloads, one of which was the Lister drill to probe the moon's subsurface and the lunar planet vac that successfully collected, transferred, and sorted lunar regolith from the moon using pressurized nitrogen gas. It proved to be a low-cost, low-mass solution for future robotic sample collection. Lister was developed jointly by Texas Tech University and Honeybee Robotics, which is a Blue Origin company that also provided the lunar planet vac. The Lister drill, plowing down an unprecedented 3 feet instead of a projected 10 feet, hit some really hard rock formations, and that's the whole discovery. We learned so much that we didn't know. I'm going to talk about why that's so significant in just a moment. A surprising finding also from Blue Ghost was the lunar temperature. Quote, nobody has ever done noon operations on the lunar surface when the sun is directly overhead. We found that it's hotter than expected and modeled. It actually starts sooner and lasts longer, Kim said, observing that the temperature swings on the moon were really really crazy. Adding to the temperature revelation was another Blue Ghost surprise finding. Quote, "We didn't know that we were going to land next to a huge crater. The sun does hit us from one side and heats us up, but the sun reflected off one side of that crater and hit us from the back. So we actually got hotter because of that reason," said Kim. So there's so much new discovery that we found, and we can pass forward to other eclipse missions. All the lunar landing components operated through the thermal swings, Kim said, even though they exceeded their thermal limits. Quote, "So in the future, we know we need to model the geographic features of the moon a lot better with higher fidelity." Blue Ghost mission controllers came up with a clever beat the heat idea during lunar operations. When the lander was going through the lunar noon and was overheating, Earth operators wanted to assure radio operations were maintained. So Blue Ghost's rectangular antenna on the lander's top deck was gimbaled in such a way as to shade the area in which the radio was contained. Quote, "We're from Texas, so we know about shade," Kim said. Indeed, that made in the shade approach got the radio back into operational configuration. Blue Ghost's 5-hour sojourn into the lunar night also provided some takeaway messages. Quote, "NASA wanted us to turn on the payload, so we did, and we actually got some payload data. The Lister was the last payload standing, and that was pretty spectacular. Information gleaned from the short foray into the lunar night," said Kim, "shows that there are ways to design lunar lander systems in a modular way to survive and thrive in the night. The Blue Ghost batteries used on the lander exceeded expectations. Taking a modular approach, Kim said more batteries could be added in the future to sustain specific components, enabling them to live on through the cold lunar night. We could add radiators as well," he said. Looking ahead, Firefly is ramping up for annual missions to the moon. The team has begun qualifying and assembling flight hardware for Blue Ghost Mission 2, which will utilize Firefly's Blue Ghost landers stacked on the group's Elytra Dark orbital vehicle for operations in lunar orbit and on the far side of the moon. That far side lander, also designed to operate for 14 days on the moon, is based on a slightly incremental design of the Blue Ghost 1 mission. Kim said, quote, "It will require us to have a tandem orbiter to provide communications to and from the Earth. So we're going to be operating 2 spacecraft simultaneously. That moon orbiter is expected to last quite a few years," said Kim. "So we're already looking at putting things like high-resolution cameras on it." In appraising the Blue Ghost Mission 1, Kim saluted the company's 750 employees that include the 60-person landers team commitment and bold approaches taken. Quote, "For some of them, this was their first spacecraft, never having built and operated a spacecraft, but they nailed it," said Kim. The $101 million mission called upon the team to do whatever it took to outthink the problems and keep the program on cost and schedule. And by the way, $101 million is 1/6 the adjusted cost of NASA Sojourn missions back in the 1960s. So if other companies can match Firefly's performance, that means that these companies can carry out the same things that NASA did for 1/6 the cost, which is pretty damn good and a goal definitely to shoot for. But let's get back to the topic that I know a lot of you are so eager to hear about. Why does this drilling experiment reveal so much about the potential hollow nature of the moon? Well, keep in mind, the moon is far less dense than the Earth. It's actually less dense than virtually any other object in the inner solar system. It's less dense than Venus. It's less dense than Mercury. In spite of the visual similarity between Mercury and the moon is far less dense. So we would expect to find less dense rocks and less dense bedrock, especially on the surface of the moon, than we would find on Earth. But that is not the case. Instead, rock samples taken from the moon's surface are substantially more dense than the overall density of the moon, and now we know, at least in this one location, the bedrock less than a meter beneath the moon's surface is also far more dense than the overall density of the moon. If this is indeed the case, it means that there has to be regions of the moon that are substantially less dense than the surface. But where? And just how much of a difference are we talking about here? Could we be talking about vast hollow spaces beneath the moon's surface? And if that is the case, how did these hollow spaces come to be? Or, to get a little more extreme and a little bit more bizarre in our possible explanations for this, what if there is a large amount of negative mass at the center of the moon? And before you start to scoff, the Pentagon investigated this potential scenario years ago, the possibility that negative mass could actually be exploited at the center of the moon. What if there is a substantial amount of some kind of unusual, bizarre matter at the center of the moon that actually has negative mass, in which case that would explain the overall density discrepancy, because there's something at the center of the moon that counteracts the overall mass of the moon. And if that is indeed the case, well, that's a resource that could have been exploited by extraterrestrial civilizations for millennia, if not eons. For example, an interstellar spacecraft like a Oumuamua might make use of a lump of negative mass in order to reduce the spacecraft's overall mass. I'm not suggesting that matter that exerts some sort of negative mass phenomena could actually be used to build a spacecraft, but instead all you would need is a chunk of negative mass to negate or at least reduce the overall mass of your spacecraft. This would explain how Oumuamua managed to accelerate out of the solar system with no visible means of propulsion. If part of it was constructed out of negative mass, or if there was just negative mass present in this 230-meter long object, then solar radiation alone, just photons, might have been enough to give it that extra push out of the solar system that was observed. All of this is, of course, speculation, but one thing we know for certain: the moon is a very, very strange object, and it's looking less and less likely that it is the product of some sort of cataclysmic collision between a large object and the Earth many millions of years ago, but rather it might be its own unique object that came from someplace else. So yes, really amazing discoveries. Once again, I continue to emphasize that I don't think there's nearly enough to suggest that there's something artificial beneath the lunar surface, that the moon is some sort of artificial construct, but definitely we continue with every new discovery, that is, we continue to find that the moon is a very, very strange object indeed. And with it being so strange, again, its origin, its nature, its background, its history, with every new discovery, it becomes very clear that the moon is a strange, strange body indeed, very unlike so many other objects in the solar system, different than anything within the inner solar system, any other planet, any other moon in the inner solar system, and also radically different from the moons in the outer solar system. The moon, our natural satellite, if indeed it is natural, is a very, very bizarre object, something that stands apart and something that warrants a lot more investigation as we finally establish a permanent presence on the lunar surface. Thank you very much for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and also please consider supporting this channel on Patreon and PayPal, and don't forget the fact that we have the merch store open again. Not all of the items that we had before, some have been discontinued, but it's only going to be open for less than another 3 weeks. So if you want to check that out, the links to the merch store are in the description and also pinned in the comments. Thanks again, and as always, stay angry about space.